Welcome to the Chai Chat Podcast, solutions for empowered living. Engaging, educating, empowering. Each week, your hosts Taron Puri, author of Finding the Guru Within, and Steve Harvey, mindset mentor to A-list celebrities and stars, bring a combined expertise of over 6 decades in mentoring, coaching, and inspiring positive solutions to the negatives which keep us stuck and unhappy. With a focus on solutions versus problems, in each episode, they discuss topics relevant to the human condition, which challenge us from moving forward into positive growth and ultimate freedom. Through stream of consciousness, unscripted dialogue and inquiry, they provide practical, deep, and actionable insights to support you in creating and living a happy, successful, fulfilled life. Join us each week and learn how to access your own inner GPS, your guru positioning system, which comes preset with all the solutions you need for empowered living. Living a life of ease versus effort is only a thought away. Let us show you what works and what doesn't.
Hello and welcome to Chai Chat, the podcast. My name is Taron Puri.
And I'm Steve Harvey.
And today's episode is entitled Doing the Avoid Dance, the Mind of Addiction.
Good topic today.
Yes, Steve, but I'm a little concerned. I have to tell you something. I'm channeling the lawyer within me as I look at the word addiction. It scares me. It really scares me. So, and lately, you know, with all the censorship going on about what you can or cannot say on a podcast, I guess maybe, a little bit of paranoia has crept in. So would you mind if I just quickly shared with our friends out there that today we're going to probably ask more questions than give answers. So because we're going to explore the mind of addiction and the whole concept of the avoid dance or avoiding. And in no way are we putting ourselves out to be experts in addictions. There are so many amazing people out there doing incredible work. There's terrific organizations that are serving as stepping stones for people once they make the choice to get to the core of that which is fueling their addiction. So I just want to be very, very clear. This is my legal disclaimer, friends, that in no way are we offering medical advice or really we don't give advice here. This whole podcast is about giving you some hopefully out of sight insights, some experiences and ideas for your consideration. I believe we need to now start becoming accountable for what we choose to buy into or not. And in order to practice that accountability, it is important to be open to receive what's being put out, but then channel it through your inner guru, your inner authority, and consider it. And then decide if it's a fit or not. It's not about making the one who's gifting you with a thought or an idea right or wrong. It has nothing to do with it. And it's neither about making yourself right and wrong. It's for your consideration. And I think it's considerate when I can say, hey, Steve, I have something I want to share with you. And please know that it's for your consideration. I may feel strongly about it. I may believe, vehemently about it. But at the end of the day, I'm going to respect your boundaries as I would expect you to respect mine. And then let the chips fall as they may, depending on where the resonance is for you. So sorry to have taken up these first few minutes of our topic today, but I just feel that it's important at this juncture that people understand that all of us, our guests, anyone that is on this program will be giving you lots of good food for thought for your consideration. And from there, please, put yourself in the driver's seat of your own life, friends, and sit with whatever we've discussed. And of course, we welcome your input, your feedback, your stories, so we can enrich this community as we move forward. Okay, I'm done. I know you're looking at me like, are you done yet, Taron? Okay, all right.
Once a lawyer, always a lawyer.
Well, that 3 minutes of legal advice, the bill's in the mail. Okay, it's going to cost you a lot.
All right.
Okay, so where are we? Doing the avoidance, the mind of addiction. Steve, I know you've had not only in-depth study in many ways, but I know you have some amazing insights in terms of your overall philosophy, if you will, or how you've seen life works. And I know that you have managed to connect the dots into this area because, you know, all the areas of our life really aren't separate because they're connected to who we are. And you know the saying, wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah.
So I'd love you to kick off with this, and I promise to listen. And give me your thoughts, ideas, and sort of feelings around the mind of addiction and the avoidance, and then we'll continue our chat. So, floor is yours.
Sure. I think you'll agree that it's been said that all addiction is basically the search for happiness. And,
Okay.
a number of years ago, I read a book where the author said there's no such thing as an addiction to a substance. There's only an addiction to the story about it. And she went on to say, we become drunk with our thinking before we become drunk with our drinking.
Love it.
When I first read that, I thought, come on,
It's kind of cute.
True. Yeah, that can't be true. But then the more and more I looked at the mind's role in addiction, I thought, I think she's onto something here, this lady. And, I think really the reason why so many people are unhappy to begin with is because we're looking for a one-sided event or experience in a two-sided universe. And so when we're resisting what is, then we start looking at the behaviors and the actions that end up, doing the avoidance, but those very behaviors end up creating the addictive behavior, because it's, let's face it, no one will ever do something unless they perceive more advantages than disadvantages, more rewards than risks, and they're not necessarily going to stop as long as unconsciously they perceive they're getting more rewards than risks, more advantages than disadvantages. And so if we're looking at how can we change the behavior to get a different result or a different outcome, and that's not necessarily working, then we've got to go back and look at what's preceding the behavior. And what I've always maintained is that thoughts can create a disturbance in the body's energy field, which then determines how you feel. And it's those feelings that direct the behavior, so to speak, which results in the outcome.
They fuel the thoughts. The feelings
Right.
fuel the thoughts, correct? Yes.
Right. So I remember a number of years ago, I was working with a lady who had tried to quit smoking 9 times. And so she came in and saw me, and we did a session with her. And at the end of the session, I couldn't get her to touch the cigarette package. We did some NLP techniques with her and stuff. And we changed her story about the cigarettes, her perception of them, so to speak, so that she couldn't even touch them. I think the image we created in her mind was that the cigarettes was crawling with cockroaches and stuff, right? So she couldn't touch it. But a week later, she came back in for a follow-up session, and she had started smoking again. And I remember I asked her why, and she said, Steve, every time I try and quit smoking, I think people think I'm a bitch. And then she went on to say, I'd rather kill myself than be seen as a bitch. And I realized right there and then that her addiction wasn't to cigarettes. Her addiction was for this need for approval. And as long as she had this need for approval, of belonging, of sense of connection, which is one of the 6 human needs, is that sense of love and connection. As long as she felt a void in her life, then that void became her highest value. So wherever she felt a sense of connection was missing in her life, she looked for something or someone to provide her with that sense of connection. And in this case, it just so happened to be cigarettes. That when she was smoking, she could congregate outside her office tower, and even in the winter months in Calgary when it was 40 below outside, all
Wow.
gathered together having a cigarette with her tribe, so to speak. And they all approved of her, who she was. They accepted her for who she was, which was her story. So as long as she perceived that the cigarettes equaled a sense of approval, how on earth is she going to give it up?
And why?
So that's
Because
yeah,
the avoid dance is around the feeling
exactly.
that she does not want to feel of being an outcast or singled out, or just basically not belonging, being
Right.
alone. And that feeling, if she doesn't know what to do with it or how to mediate it, or then isn't it just easier to indulge a power tool from the outside to help you feel empowered? And in this
Yeah.
case, the cigarette promised to give her that.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that, so the more I worked with people, the more I realized that that was a common denominator among a lot of people, is that they were unhappy due to the fact that they had a lopsided perception about reality, that there was more pain than pleasure, more disadvantages than advantages. But once I took them through the process I work with and was able to collapse those lopsided perceptions, then they were left with love and gratitude for what is. And so, it's like when we're infatuated by something or someone, we can't see the downsides. And when
Correct.
we're resentful, we can't see the upsides. But in actuality, both are occurring simultaneously all of the time. And if we suddenly see both sides, we enter into what St. Thomas Aquinas called synchronicity.
Okay.
And this is where I need to give a little shout out to my high school back in Glasgow, because my high school was St. Thomas Aquinas Secondary School. So
Oh, wonderful.
anyway, when we see one side without the other, we enter diachronicity, which means living through time. But synchronicity, as Deepak Chopra would say, is living in an ageless body and a timeless mind. Right? And I think to get to that place of ageless body, timeless mind, you need to love what is. You have to be perfectly at peace with whatever's going on in your life. But I think the reason why so many people become addicted because of the mind is inability to equilibrate the lopsided perceptions. And so they're left being tossed around in infatuation, resentment, pain versus pleasure, sorrow versus joy. They're not able to say that both have to coexist and embrace the duality. And it's no different when whatever their drug of choice is, they have infatuation, they have the high, but they don't perceive the low. And it has to coexist. And I think you and I have discussed this before, and you spoke about David Hawkins's work on that very
Absolutely.
thing.
Yes, the Power versus Force, one of my favorite books, because this man's brilliance, I can't say enough about it, but he was able to measure and equilibrate in amazing proper scientific methodology, right? The frequencies of individuals, of items, of behaviors, and basically created a power versus force scale. And anything below 200 on that scale, okay, was force. What in Tarun's language we call effort. It was effort versus ease. And 200 and above, we started to become empowered. And we started, in other words, run the energy of ease in moving through life and in creating and manifesting our purpose, our passion, our destiny, call it what you will. And I had found when I was rereading or reviewing the book that he had a few very, very interesting insights when he did the work on addictions, especially alcohol, drugs. And he made a very interesting comment. He said, when you hear somebody that is addicted to a substance, you hear the term, oh, they needed or were looking for or they were seeking a high. Oh, when I do this drugs, I get a high. And he looked at that from a frequency and vibrational point of view, and he identified after doing some experiments that what that substance, and we can, I think, relate this to even other things maybe that aren't substances, but they're behaviors, right, that are addictive, okay?
Yeah.
That it wasn't the substance that was really giving you the high. It was actually, and especially with alcohol and drugs, though in this case, something that chemically kind of altered your system, it actually suppressed the lows, okay? So by suppressing the lows, so all you were hearing, like imagine if it was an orchestra, and suddenly you had some hearing things on, and I, in the back, punched in some numbers, and suddenly all the lows got cut out. And now all you were hearing through this filter was the highs. So you were experiencing in this concert the highs, okay? And that's an artificial high, just like a stock market, right? When there's an artificial high that's created, what do you think follows?
Crash.
The crash, the low, because obviously that equilibrium. So what happens is that, people do get this amazing high, but it's temporary and it's surface. And it gives the illusion of the pleasure that they're seeking or the peace even that they're seeking, because they are in the avoidance of avoiding pain at all costs because they don't know what to do with the pain. And so he said that by artificially suppressing the lows, you experience the high, but then at the end of that, okay, and then as you know, to me, it's a cycle of quicksand, right? Where quickly your biochemistry, all the other factors start playing. And now the struggle's not in the psyche alone. Now it compounds and becomes multifaceted. As even the behaviors and the tracks that get established. So David Hawkins was very, very insightful on that. And I'm very mindful of one thing, though, when it comes to addictions, is that it's very important that, as frustrating as an addict's behavior can be, okay, and I really want to broaden just for a moment. I'm feeling, maybe it's the lawyer in me, but I've seen people in the world of weightlifting that I think are ridiculously addicted, right? I mean, there is, I think, an aesthetic, and then there's just this need. When are you big enough? When are you bulky enough? When is right? It's when I'm not enough, then anything on the outside is never enough, right? So I need more. And I've seen, so whether it's weightlifting or food or all of these other things, right? It's
mega yachts.
Right. I mean, okay, so now we're getting into the whole sociological and the whole idea of more. When is enough, or is it even such a concept?
Because that's interesting that you mentioned that, because I think too often we're quick to judge addicts as people that come from lower working class people, and it doesn't affect the upper class and the middle class, and it doesn't make any choice. It doesn't
discriminate
is what I'm looking for. Sorry. It doesn't discriminate based on what your bank balance is or what your education is. It affects everyone, but we're so quick to judge, and we think, oh, they must be, and we fill in the blank about that person, and we have no idea who they are. But what I've seen in my travels is that addiction affects every one of us, and every one of us is addicted to something or someone. Sometimes.
Very much.
you know?
That's right. And now here's the thing. The point that I was trying to make here is that our social systems, our societies have created an environment where there's what I want to call legitimize addictions, right? And then there's those ones that we have judgments on, like,
Right.
and we discussed this, where it's totally okay for you to be addicted to the need for more money, more possessions, more fame, more success. You're rewarded if you add um, another company into your group of companies. You're rewarded if you take out another little guy and eat up one more and consume another, and this megalomania kind of energy, right, that takes place. So we think that's wonderful. We don't see that as an addiction, the need for the power and the control, right? But when somebody has a difficult time with food, okay, or some of the other kind of more obvious things, we tend to want to pounce on them and say, "Why are you so weak?" Right? What isn't the person who they become so huge worldwide, and yet they need one more company? Aren't they equally weak? Like it's
Yeah. Yeah. But I think, when we look at people as being weak, another way I think of saying that is that we're perceiving them as being broken. And I don't believe, and I don't think you believe either, that there's any
no,
broken people.
no.
Instead, I think there's just people doing the best they can with what they've been taught to do, what they know how to do, and maybe the resources available to them at the time. But there's no such thing as broken people. They're just simply trying to survive. And I think, where society has failed in the past is that we made it wrong, to be addicted to something. And so then we go about trying to punish people as if that would be a deterrent for them to give it up and
Well,
an
exactly.
incentive to stop, And the truth is, if they knew how to stop, they would.
Well, as you know,
But
I have a background in criminology. My BA was at criminology at Simon Fraser's University, and I remember in that program on a practicum working with the RCMP with victim assistance programs. We were the first actually to establish one. And I also remember looking at the models of why people reoffend or why people don't rehabilitate. Okay, so at that time, this was centuries ago. Yeah, rehabilitation was the buzzword, right? We need to rehabilitate, and we need to. And I kept on saying, how are you going to successfully rehabilitate someone that you are judging? Okay, you started from the premise that they are wrong, that they are broken, that something needs fixing. Okay, and they need to be refitted or retrofitted in order to fit my model of what I say. You see, I think that society has failed so many people who've come in as creatives, who have come in as individuals, who have come in with a very different perspective, thinking, and I want to say gift. And yet they have been marginalized because they
yeah,
weren't fitting the narrative. And even in the criminal, quote, justice system, what I recognized was I kept on saying, rehabilitation will not work without acceptance. Right.
yeah.
And
And
so, yeah.
yeah, and the fact that you say they're being marginalized, again, that's that disconnection. See, which is part of the 6 human needs. We need that sense of love and connection. And so, that there's a famous TED talk where they talk about our approach to addictions has been wrong. And they mention a study that was done where they took a rat and they isolated the rat in a cage.
Okay.
And they placed in the cage 2 bottles of water. One of the bottles had been laced with heroin. And so the rat started drinking the laced water. And a short time later, it was dead. But then they tried a different experiment and they took several rats and they placed them in a cage that was like the Disneyland for rats.
Yeah.
all these slides and tunnels to explore and cheese and God knows what, but lots of rats, and they could have as much fun with one another as they wanted to. And they placed the two bottles of water in there again. One was plain water and the other one was laced with a heroin. And the interesting thing was the rats in that cage hardly ever touched the heroin, and none of them died. And so it just showed you that when there's that sense of community and a sense of connection, that people didn't reach for that laced water with the heroin in it. But when you isolated the rat and took it out of society, it was dead within, a short time. And I think you'll see the same thing with, a lot of addicts that come together. I lived in Vancouver for a while and real close to, East Hastings. I was down in Gastown. And you would see, the communities of homeless people and drug addicts. But the thing that they had together was a sense of community, a sense of connection. And that's, one of the interesting things about the 6 human needs psychology is that we will find a way to meet those needs. And sometimes it'll be determined positive behavior, and sometimes it'll be determined as negative behavior.
Mm-hmm.
But either way, we can have a connection from someone through lovemaking, for example, but we can also have a connection with someone by fighting with them.
So, in the same city in Vancouver, so you're talking the east side, and directly across at the west side, you have the clubs. You have the yacht club, you have the tennis clubs that people also gather and get their human needs met, and discuss their latest triumph of which street they own now. And that's okay. Sorry.
That's okay.
I did my law in Vancouver. I was at UBC, so that city has a special place in my heart. But I saw this playing out, and I played duty counsel for East Van, and I saw kind of what went on. And it is difficult in a sense not to judge, because you see the level of devastation that a person imposes on themselves. And I can see sometimes that it's a challenge not to judge the individual and say, well, they're just like that. There is something, quote, wrong with them, without looking at the context, the street, the city, the world, the place. And that is not about a lack of accountability, because, I'm a stickler for accountability. I would hold each one of them accountable for the choices and the decisions they're making. However, when we pull back the judge in us, and I know a little bit about judging, and we open up to the heart of compassion and the mind of compassion, and we can look at a human being who, as we've talked in other episodes, maybe an individual, but they're not separate. See, they're not separate. And if I can look at that individual in pain as not outside of me, not separate, and I can do an inquiry as to where have we as a society, where have we as a world failed them? Not from a place of blaming ourselves either, just about where can we assign accountability, and then together. And I think Gabor Mate's work there is brilliant, because he's very real and he's very grounded and he's deeply compassionate. And he doesn't make excuses for these people, but he doesn't judge them either, right? So the door opens for people to explore how they got there.
I think the truth is we simply don't know how to deal with pain. We don't know how to deal with the hurt that's with inside of us. And, so our best coping skill then is to divert our attention to do the avoid dance.
That's right.
We'll do just about anything, or we'll say, I will do just about anything, but don't ask me to go within. Don't ask me to deal with that. So we've become, escapaholics or avoidaholics, and so, let's face it, if you feel bad and you have no skills, then watch what you do with it, right? You're going to use whatever is handy, whether it's food, alcohol, drugs, sex, smoking, smartphones, shopping,
Yeah,
addicted
video
to
games,
yoga, you know,
golfing.
you name it. And so you will use anything so that you don't have to feel what needs to be felt, the stuff that drives the addiction. And so this is where I question, you know, is a lot of people say addiction is a disease, and I'm not sure. I'm still undecided on that. You know, is it a result of some things that we haven't let go of? Some of the poor choices, as you were saying, that have led to the addictive lifestyle. You know, but you know, every one of us has got painful memories.
Yes.
If I asked you right now to think of somebody that really bugs you to no end, you got it?
It like took microseconds. It
Yeah.
just took microseconds. I mean, wow, right there, bang.
Right. I hope it wasn't me.
I was trying not to look directly at you when you asked that question. I'm just saying, but okay, let's continue. Yeah.
So then you may say, "Oh God, I need a drink," and take a drink to avoid dealing with that person who's your petty tyrant, as I like to call them. And you may have a temporary reprieve, but where are those feelings when the drug or alcohol wears off? They're still inside you.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't matter how far you try and run from it, they're still within you.
Because wherever you go,
there they are, right?
It's
and
like
so
trying to outrun. It's like trying to outrun your shadow.
Exactly. And so
right?
This again, where I keep coming back to, and we mentioned this in the episode of Manage Your Energy, Not Your Stress. I keep coming back to the fact that thoughts create a disturbance in the body's energy system, which determines how you feel, which then determines the behavior or the actions that you take and the outcomes that you get. And so when I've been working with people who maybe have had some addictions in the past, I know that just changing the behavior is not the answer. I've got to go back to looking at unearthing what is the story beneath it? What is that unresolved issue that's still causing the disturbance in the body's energy system, which is determining how they feel? And it's those feelings that drive the behavior.
So and what I'm hearing,
yeah, go on.
I'm just hearing what came in my mind was that along with the intervention, which is a key piece, we also need an intervention. I just made up a word, Steve, so I had to jump in. Sorry. I can't help myself. So
always a wordsmith.
We need an intervention plus an intervention in order to make a permanent shift in the psyche that will hopefully reconnect a person to their worth and their value. Because my definition of pain is simple. It's a separation.
Right.
All pain is a perception or a feeling of separation. And so in the matrix that we live in, it feels very real. But in the soul consciousness, separation is an illusion. We're individual, but we're not separate.
Exactly. Yeah.
I want to ask you something. See, I've always wondered, just going along that way, because, I'm a kind of a unique thinker. We'll put it that way. It's a kind way to say it because, yeah. And I have never, let me put it another way. I've always wondered, why is it that I have not felt that addictive push or pull? And there's a second part of this question. So that in law school, let's talk about law school. Since I'm in my lawyer mode today, of course, we're all wonderful, 200 students and we had law school parties and we all got together. And what do law students do on a Friday night after law school? Well, they pass around a joint because they're lawyers, right? Right. And that time It wasn't as well accepted. And it never interested me. It's like those rats, it never it's not that I said to myself puritanically, oh no, Taron, you cannot, you must not, it's not ethical, you're a lawyer. None of it. Or, it just never and sometimes when I did try, I had a friend once and he said, you just got to try this because it's like amazing and you'll feel this and that. And that person I could see within a few minutes get into this soft and wonderful and kind place. And I was waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm going, okay, any minute now, I'm gonna feel right. So as to a little bit about that mind of addiction, and maybe it just illustrates part of the point that I've been so self-referred. Like, I've despite all the challenges I've had, and I've given my power away in other areas. It's not that I'm totally there wherever there is, but I want to feel and understand within myself what keep, like, if I have a coffee today, great. If I have 3 coffees today, great. If I don't have a coffee for 4 days, great. So, whereas I know people that you don't even go near them, talk about 5 feet, try 10 feet until they've had their coffee. So I'm just throwing these thoughts out so that for people who are like me, and I've worked with a lot of people with addictions over the years, cocaine, this and that, and helped them. But I always like to want to say how would that feel, and what's the difference? So
I think the difference is that you have more of a balanced perception about the coffee. Whereas, and I think this is why they call people users. The other people are using the coffee.
Using. Yes.
Because they're perceiving more benefits than drawbacks. Again, that one-sided experience in a two-sided universe is what they're perceiving, but it's not true. And so the universe is a great way of balancing things out.
Yeah.
Nature does that all the time, and so when you've got more of a balanced perception of something, you don't have that same pull toward it. It's like, if I have it, great. If I don't have it, great. Whereas someone who's got more of a lopsided perception, they've got to have it. Because in that moment, as I said earlier, they're perceiving more advantages than disadvantages, more rewards than risks, more benefits than drawbacks. And I see that as what drives all of human behavior.
I think you've nailed it. You know what? That's a key word here. Let's just highlight that, using, because users and using. So when I take that word and I ask myself, okay, well, Taron, where have you used at times, right? Like, whether it's addiction to, okay, I'm going to go to sacred territory now. Okay, so I hope you're taking a deep breath. Whether it is a need for more books when you don't have walls or shelves left, right? It just popped into my mind, Steve. I'm not saying anything to our friends out there. Hint, hint. Okay, or right, right. Okay,
I'll get you later.
I know you will get me. Or the millions of other things. I mean, there's the obvious things, and then, like you had made the point earlier, who isn't an addict, who hasn't had addictive tendencies? And so even though I don't think of myself as that, if I was to go in to say, well, maybe it's a matter of degree, maybe it's a matter of, what have I used? And some people are, then we can go into the area of using guilt to control, right? So
using intelligence to control.
Oh my God. Okay. Right. What's that look, Steve? Right.
So you said, your fellow students at law school, they maybe be using, some cannabis for a weekend, having a smoke or whatever.
Yes.
What was your drug of choice? Was to do more study.
That's true. Actually, I actually watched, observed, studied, and explored, and found books. And so, so in some way,
so we all have a drug of choice, I mean, look at me with football. When I watch my team, the whole world could stand still when I'm for those 90 minutes. And it was interesting because I read a quote from the manager of the team the other day after the game. And he said, 60,000 fans showed up for the game. And many of those people were dealing with problems in their life. But for 90 minutes, we gave them an escape from that.
Oh, there's the word, the escape. Okay, so this, this spawns another nuance. I think it's very fair that we address that. Okay, so, and by the way, you people who are in North America, when he talks about football, It's what has been known as soccer. Okay, just so that you don't send him the wrong jersey. If you want to send Steve a gift, make it green and white stripes. Okay, I'm just putting that out there because we have audiences worldwide, and we don't want them to get mixed up with some jersey with a big number on it. And yeah, okay. But here's my distinction then. So here's a thought that comes up to me. How do I distinction? Yeah, that's good, Taron. How do I distinguish between an addiction and a passion? Okay, if I'm a vocalist, I love singing and I have a passion for singing. And if I say to you, well, Steve, no, I'm sorry, I don't have time for you this weekend because I'm singing. I just can't get enough. Or I'm an artist and I'm in the studio. And so I am painting and, it's a passion for me, or I'm a woodworker or I'm a weightlifter and I'm in the gym, right? So I could say to you, it's just a passion, Steve. You're just too bad you don't have one. Join me, right? Rather than I'm not addicted. So let's explore that nuance.
Yeah, I think it comes down to, again, is the behavior that you're doing, whether it's playing an instrument, singing and playing golf or whatever, are you doing it because you're passionate and you love doing it? Or are you doing it because you're avoiding dealing with something else?
Intention. You're saying that, and you know what that reminds me of? I was going to say that I think it's the outcome, and whether the outcome, the result of that behavior, whether it separates you from you or it unifies you, and therefore, moves you towards more of you. Let me put it in a bit of a more practical way. Mm-hmm. I'm not addictive, and yet I love to have a drink or two. But in what context and in which situations? And this is what I've guided and mentored my clients to. I said, it's not that the gin and tonic is bad, but it's the association that I make when I choose to have it. So if I've just finished this podcast and I'm like, oh my gosh, by the time we got all the technical stuff right and everything working, and I had to say the right things, and oh boy, that was stressful. I think I need a drink. I'm going to go have a gin and tonic to relax me. The message that I have given, and my mind is very quick at learning, is associated the stress of a workout or whatever I had to do with that. I will never do that. Okay. I would rather have a tea or an herbal tea or hot water. When I will do it is when you come over afterwards and you say, Taron, wasn't that just a great day? And hey, look, we've got another podcast behind us and it went well. Yeah, good. And well, we had our challenges, but we've learned and life is good. And I'd say, you know what, Steve? Life is good. Let's share a gin and tonic, right? Now I've associated a celebration and a positive energy with my friend in celebration. I guarantee you, and I'd love to get the chemists and the physicists to come in and do a test to show you the impact of that substance on me, whether it's going to be negative or positive, depending on the intention that I have associated with it. Does that make sense?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's why the power of the mind is so important. And let's face it, if you look at the human body, some of the stuff that we put in the human body, if you were to put that into a car engine, it would die immediately.
Immediately.
But yeah, the human body still able to process all that junk and eliminate it. And this is where in Ayurveda we talk about the power of digestion, and it's a different concept slightly than in Western world. Digestion in the Western world is about what you're eating, whereas in Ayurveda it's about what you take in with the senses, the five senses, and what you're able to utilize and eliminate that which you don't need. And when you're in the proper mindset, you could be eating junk, but the body's able to process it. But when you're not the proper mindset, you could be eating the most healthy organic food on the planet. But if you're just in the middle of having an argument with your loved one and you're trying to digest that food, you're digesting that food, and those toxic, angry emotions will convert that wonderful organic food into toxins in the body. And so that's why Ayurveda would say then that how and when you eat is equally important as what you eat.
What a lost science. So you mean,
You
so
know?
are you trying to tell me that drive-throughs may not be the answer?
You see? How many people do you know sit and eat their dinner while they're watching the news on television?
Oh, I'll talk about addictions. I was just going to say to you, and how many people have invited you over for a dinner, for a tea, for a coffee, but they absolutely cannot have that visit without the idiot tube being on. Right? Like, right? It's this need to have that thing flashing and sounding, regardless of what else is happening there. They
Because we're addicted to noise, to distraction, the avoidance, because as long as there's noise going on, we can't be silent and go within. And when we go within, that's why in meditation, quite often what happens is when people take the time to be still, a lot of the stuff that has been suppressed for years starts to resurface, and they can't handle it.
Oh, it's like you've avoided going in that room for all these years, and suddenly you decide to go, and when you open the door, they go, "There you are. We've been waiting for you. Okay, have a seat." And so now you have to. The awareness comes up, and it can become overwhelming, is what you're saying, unless there's a tool or to help people
On how to deal
now
with it.
deal with that
Exactly.
energy that has been suppressed, repressed, depressed, unimpressed.
Right.
Right? Like that somehow. And so people, even though meditation and visualizations has been shown to give you the equal number of endorphins as any
Yes.
drug of choice without the side effects. But in a sense, what you're
Exactly.
saying, it might not be a side effect, but there might be an inside effect. Here's another word today. I am just right on today, huh? There's no side effects, but there's inside effects. In other words, I remember when I was studying criminology and doing a law course, we had a visiting professor from the US. I remember very little of him. He was wise. He was very well known. And as a thank you for him being a visiting professor and just an amazingly inspiring man, I took him a little gift and a little visit. And I remember sitting across him in the home that he was renting by Simon Fraser University there. And his name was John. But we had this chat, and I wanted some of the wisdom from someone who was so far down the road, and I hadn't even got to law school yet. And he said to me, he says, "Taron, we live in a world where people are in fear of and maybe even terrorized of stillness and silence. And that people will do anything to avoid being with themselves, by themselves." And he says, whereas I come home after doing all the things that I do, teaching and researching and speaking and lawyering, and I look forward to coming into a dimly lit or a dark room with nothing on, no radio, and sitting back in a comfortable space and just being still. And he says that thought terrifies most of humanity. And he says, so, as you go forward, if you can harness that energy, you're going to find your journey and your ability to learn and equilibrate. And I shared with him, I'm a meditator. Luckily, I grew up with that my dad being my first guru. But I mean, what is so terrifying about being with yourself?
Yeah, I think it's scary for so many people. And look at smartphones now. Everywhere you go, people are just pulling them up. They can't go 2 seconds. They put it back in their pocket. 2 seconds later, they're back checking again, addicted to the phones. And again, these are the same people that struggle with sitting in silence. They feel that they've constantly got to be stimulated to keep, their world exciting for them. But I keep hearing what you say, but at what cost?
At what cost? Exactly.
What's the cost involved in that? Look at the relationships that are suffering as a result of it. I remember being in Bangkok And my wife and I went for brunch, and this family came in, and there must have been 10 or 12 kids at the table. And it was like, 2 or 3 brothers and sisters and their kids. And then they brought in Gran and Grandpa, and they wheeled them in a wheelchair and sat them at the table. And I looked over and I thought, oh, it's lovely, big family gathering for brunch. And then when I looked over again, every single family member was on their mobile phone except Gran and Grandpa. Gran and Grandpa were sitting looking around like, and they were well on their age, and obviously they didn't have long to live on this planet. And here they were, all the family, the sons and daughters and grandsons and daughters, and totally oblivious to them.
So this precious time that one could have had, and the wisdom, I don't care, how much you like somebody or not, if they've got 30 years on you, they have an experience and a wisdom that you just don't. They have life experience, and you can learn from and through them. So rather than having that experience, people were there but not there, right? And I guess one of the, I'm taking your drawbacks and benefits a bit far, but maybe the last 2 years served this purpose well, because now they could all have dinner over Zoom, and you're looking at your device, and so you're feeling connected and not withdrawing, right? Maybe it felt more natural. I'm being right.
Yeah, it's also, it's forced people to be together in, confined spaces for, a great length of time. And what a lot of people have discovered, that they don't even like the person that they're married to, that they've got nothing in common.
Oh my
and
gosh,
so
Steve.
you'll see the divorce rates are increasing. But then at the other flip side of the coin, there's people who are coming together and reconnecting more than they've ever been, because they're being forced to be together. So again, it's seeing the duality. It's seeing that is, it's not a one-sided event in a two-sided universe, that both of these experiences have to coexist. There'll be more divorces, but I guarantee there'll be more babies born as well.
So what you're saying is there's always a choice, is what you made that point a few episodes ago. Regardless of how you feel, there's no choice. There's always a choice.
Yes.
Right?
But as long as you're making the choices from a balanced perception.
Okay.
You see, but so many people are making choices, like, should I stay, should I go, for example, based on a lopsided perception that there was more drawbacks than benefits, or more benefits than drawbacks. And that's the illusion. That's what gets us in trouble.
Correct. And seriously, this is a huge topic, because there's so many branches to this tree, right? Because of course human behavior is human behavior, and we're consistent across the board. Because the other thoughts that I'm having as you're speaking is, where does obsessive compulsive behavior fit in here, right? Right, where's the distinction? Because whether it's an addiction, or I understand, as having worked with people with obsessive compulsives, that there's a need to calm down a thought or a perception, right? And to equilibrate, so that, but the feeling that you have that precedes the obsessive compulsive behavior maybe not different from the feeling that somebody's having when they reach for fill in the blank drug of choice. Okay.
Right.
So,
but what's preceding the feeling is that story. For example, a lot of people go to a cocktail party, and someone's lights a cigarette and passes a cigarette around to the group. Well, if you and I were at that cocktail party, you and I wouldn't reach for the cigarette because we're non-smokers. But a smoker does. So what's different? They've got a different story about the cigarette than you and I. And we don't have to use willpower to say no.
No.
You see? So again, it comes back to that perception about it. What's the story about it? And as long as you're seeing, for example, obsessive compulsive behavior, any behavior for that matter, whatever we do because we perceive more benefits than drawbacks. That's why we'll do it. If we perceive more drawbacks than benefits, we don't do it. But also, if the energy system is still disturbed, we can look at the story, but if we don't bring the energy system into balance simultaneously, then that will keep creating more lopsided perceptions.
Okay.
Because that disturbance in the energy field will create the negative emotions, and the negative emotions will create the imbalanced energy field. So they're coexisting. So we can't separate them. Mm-hmm. And so when we take an approach that investigates the story through inquiry and bringing the energy system into balance at the same time, then how we feel is more balanced. And from that perspective, we're able to then change the behavior and get a different outcome that we're looking for. But as long as the energy system remains imbalanced, as long as we're running a lopsided perception, then that behavior will always be congruent with those previous two.
And the story continues. So the point is that when we're working with the energy system, I want to try to make this a little bit sort of nuance for people, is that the energy system will impact us at all those levels where the addiction can be played out. Physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. And even if we go to the spiritual dimensions here, we start to even look at ancestral lines and the energies that get passed down through the 12 cranials. And I've done all kinds of study and recognized how much the actions, behaviors, beliefs, experiences of our forefathers on both mom and dad's side, going several levels up, are impacting my thoughts, behaviors, and perceptions. And I find that the North American Native communities, and I'm sure around the world, but I've experienced in sweat lodges where they very much get this concept. And so when one of their people has been able to overcome an addiction to alcohol, let's say, I remember being in a sweat lodge once, and there's a round that you go through and you give gratitude. And the sweat lodge master in one of the rounds was saying, let us give gratitude for Joe for finally mastering his addiction or getting over it. And know that all the grandfathers are smiling and very pleased, because as he has done that, shifted the energy, it has also released his forefathers from what they couldn't do. So I'm just trying to give another layer of awareness to people that when we choose to do our work, if you want to call it that, or when we choose to finally make the choice, because, one of the key things around addictions and all of life is our fear of change. We want predictability. And if this, oh my gosh, if I stop smoking, and then my life is going to change, and Steve's not going to hang out with me anymore, and they're going to look at me like, well, you were one of us. And, that fear of change, right? Or not to do with change is huge. And yet the power that we have, I just want to come back, the power that we hold here. And when we do make a change in our psyche at the energy level, not only do we immediately benefit, and of course those in our families and friends, but that benefit goes to the forefathers and the upcoming generations. That's how powerful we are. That spiritual dimension cannot be understated.
It's that ripple effect. Everything we say and do affects everyone around us. Because again, absolutely, individual but not separate. But how do we deal with that fear? And what is the fear? Again, the fear is a perception that we're going to have more imagination in the future, that we're going to have more pain than pleasure.
Correct. And so you ward it off.
The universal laws state they have to coexist. The truth is life gives you both sides, but only always. So we need to learn to equilibrate those lopsided perceptions so that we're left with nothing but love and gratitude for what is. And when you come from a place of love and gratitude, fear doesn't exist.
It cannot. I mean,
it cannot.
Yes.
But when someone's frozen with fear, it's because they're running a story that they're about to experience more pain than pleasure, more disadvantages than advantages.
And hence the avoid dance.
Yeah,
right.
There's times when you need healthy fear.
Well, we did a whole episode on that where there's an appropriate fear, but let me make the distinction. There's a healthy fear, which the fact of it speaks for itself, and then there's the using. See, I love that word using. I would like to go into the week after this episode and start addressing, even at the mundane levels, where am I using? In other words, what are my excuses? You see, when it's a fact, it's a reason, because the reason tells me it's pointing to the fact of, and I address it appropriately. And sometimes the fear can point me in the proper direction of self-preservation. Okay. And like, how do people, now I'm really going to say something controversial. How much do people use religion? Because of the fear of this God that is judgmental. But please, let's not go there. In this episode, we will maybe look at what was the famous saying? Religion is the opiate of the masses. Right? So without making any particular judgments, because we're just exploring the mind of addiction and the dynamic that we engage in. Where does our attention and our intention go when I'm choosing to have a drink, for instance, and what is my mind associating that with? Because if I start making a habit of coming home at the end of the week, some people say, I don't drink all week, but come Friday night, me and my white wine are friends, and I make sure I go that route and I go to stop at that place, see the tracks and everything. So when I'm helping people to change the behavior, I said, you cannot even drive this way. You have to, I don't care if it's longer way to get home, but as part of your making a shift, take another route. So those tracks and triggers, those smells, those sights, all of those things do not reactivate you. And sometimes that involves being away from the people. I had a client many years ago when I was living in Vancouver. They were from Calgary. They belonged to a very rich family and an extremely dominating, there's money, and the mother was just this powerhouse. And this gentleman had some personal issues as to his self-identity, and he didn't quite fit in. He was a lovely, lovely gentleman, and he had a cocaine addiction. And he lived on a guest house on the property. The family had just out of town here. There's those beautiful sprawling properties, and he was on a guest house, but is on the same property as the mother, right? All the other people, and he was in his 40s at that time, maybe 50s. Like I said, a lovely gentleman. So he came out to Vancouver, and we did a 10 to 14 day, almost a 10, 12-day program with him. And I didn't claim to, again, be, I was dealing with the mind, right? Like I guided him to have the proper help, but we needed to get underneath exactly what you're saying, the mind. And we had amazing results, actually. He and the gentleman that emerged once he got cleaner and clearer with all of this was phenomenal. And he started to see his value, and he started to see his worth. And there was an incident in Vancouver because he knew somebody very high up in the legal field, out of all things, who he went to visit, who offered him the best of the best. I know that's a whole other topic. And he said no. Okay, so he had gotten to that point, and he said, I wish I could stay longer and continue this work with you. I said, well, you're welcome to. I mean, I was working my normal full-time job, and, just created an environment for him. But he says, no, I have to go back because there's a very special family gathering. And I said, really? I said, so are you thinking of going back to that property? Well, yeah, and it's important, and I should be there. And I said, with all the same people, the mother, the sister, and I said, I'd really think twice about that, because when you're open and vulnerable and looking to make a shift, you're going to have the same tracks and triggers when you go back there, because it's what your mind knows. And it just takes a look, a smell, the program is running. And I implored him not to do that. He said, I will come back. I will go, and I'll come back. And you know what? instead of taking the next step now and maybe getting help, in the proper ways and all the pieces we needed to do, because he'd already made the core decision, he was right back into it. And his dealers knew where to find him. They would just knock at the window.
But again, that shows you the power of the subconscious mind at play. That
Yes.
as long as you're just trying to solve the problem on the conscious level,
Right.
the
program is still running. Yes, the triggers are still there.
Subconscious level, you see, and so it's so important to be able to look at the subconscious and how it's playing out, or the unconscious, how it's playing out in this situation, but also to really collapse the lopsided perceptions about these people who were triggering them, and to find the benefits to their behavior and how it serves them, and how there's nothing ever in the way, it's always on the way.
Excellent.
And so then when he goes back to these same environments, he can go back and say, bring it on, because it's no longer triggering him anymore. They're still there, but his experience and his perception of them changes. Not just, as I say, not just on a conscious level, but the subconscious is affected as well, and the energy system is affected.
He has neutralized the charge, basically. It's like walking back into a minefield that's still alive, or it's walking back and neutralizing the charges so that it's not the same experience anymore. And that's the journey. That's the inside out journey. It has to be resolved and dissolved at the source where all these charges are, and the tracks and the triggers.
Yeah. And sometimes it's better, as you say, just to avoid putting yourself into that environment at this time.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're in the process of, like I said, not wanting to do the wine, the beer, the whatever it is that you think Friday night you've earned, then I'll encourage you to drive home not past your favorite store. I mean,
I don't go to the pub.
Well, yeah, it's just wise. We have to do pattern interrupts, and we have to do rerouting until you build up the resolve where you could go to that store 10 months from now and pick up a wine for your guests coming and drink water. I mean, but again, it's a process. And I think people have to also recognize that the mind works well when you chunk it down, and you do it chunked down in pieces, because of course, don't forget, the psyche and the psychobiology of the body is going to go into a reset, and we cannot be too harsh, because the consequences of that could be very hard in terms of the depth and the breadth of the healing crisis we could go into. So yes, I'd like you to fully heal tomorrow from whatever addiction you're running. However, can we chunk it down and be kind and gentle in the process? Okay. So that we don't put ourselves in peril by going into from this energy set to this energy set, which could be too harsh. It's like detoxing you overnight, totally, with a drug, rather than, taking 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So, Steve, you know what? It is time to wrap up. But wow, we've just barely scratched the surface here. This is I think this is a huge topic and really worthy of investigation. And I think I would love to do a weekend with some folks and really doing exactly what we're talking about here. Is that can we investigate the stories? Can we look at the dynamics, and can we really together come to unity, and create a community and get some insights into how one can navigate this? Will it be easy? No. Can we bring ease to it? Absolutely. And how? By opening. By opening, being willing, and committing to a process.
And I think a good little exercise for people to do is to make a list of at least 150 benefits that you get from, your drug of choice, alcohol, drugs, shopping, Netflix, whatever it is.
Weights, books.
To make a list of books, to make a list of 150 benefits from taking that, right? And then make a list of 150 viable alternatives that will get you the same benefits.
Wow. Okay, I feel at least a seminar or workshop in the offings here. I like the idea of how you're looking at this. So thank you so much, Steve. I really
Thank you.
I thought this may be a bit of a shorter podcast, but I don't know. The more we discussed, the more nuances and branches and more questions arose. And again, I'm looking forward to the thoughts and questions and queries of our listeners and friends all over the world. And bring them on, because we would love to investigate on your behalf and with you as to how we can make this world a little bit more loving, a little bit kinder, right? Yeah. And peaceful. So on that note, I want to take a moment and just say to everybody, please be at peace. Om Shanti.
Shanti.
Till we meet again.
We trust you found practical value in this podcast and will enthusiastically share it with others in your circle. And if you are so moved, leave us a review or write a post on social, tagging #ChaiChatPodcast, and we will show our appreciation. Promise. Tarun Puri and Steve Harvey welcome you to join us for a Chai Chat at all of our live events and more. Connect with us with your questions, topic suggestions, and reviews at info@chaichatpodcast.com.